Spring is sort of getting here. I notice all the, I keep waiting for those first buds, and they're just like, it's not time yet, it's not time yet, it's not time yet. And it's like, and that's sort of how it is sometimes when we're waiting, right? Waiting for God to begin to move. And we're looking for new life in this season and new life in us as well. And I think, it is a time of waiting and watching to see what God will do in us too. Well, as Case mentioned this morning, we're starting a new series on the 10 Commandments. It's called The Law is Love. And we're going to be reading from the Heidelberg Catechism, is one of our confessions that does a great deal to teach us what that law is about, and both the positive and the negative force of it. And so we'll reflect on that as we go. Today we're trying to tackle 2 commandments. So we actually have a fair chunk, just to get us started. They're closely linked, but and then we're also going to reflect a bit on Romans chapter 6, and so that's going to be a text that I'd like us to read first. So let's open God's Word together. Romans 6, verses 8 to 18. Now if we died with Christ, we believe that we will also live with him. For we know that since Christ was raised from the dead, he cannot die again. Death no longer has mastery over him. The death he died to sin once for all, but the life he lives to God. In the same way, count yourselves dead to sin, but alive to God in Christ Jesus. Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body so that you obey its evil desires. Do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and offer every part of yourself to him as an instrument of righteousness. For sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not under the law, but under grace. What then? Shall we sin because we are not under the law, but under grace? By no means. Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. But thanks be to God that though you used to be slaves to sin, you have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. You have been set free from sin and become slaves to righteousness. I think we hear a lot of that word of resurrection, right? Laying down our old selves, right? Leaving behind sin, claiming God, claiming righteousness, moving into a new life, dying and rising with Christ, right? Very, very much Easter type of language. So let's look now at the catechism then. Okay, so I'm going to read the question, if you will read the answer. Okay, so first is, how are these 2 commandments divided? And what does the Lord require in the first commandment?
That I, wanting to attain to my very salvation, avoid and shun all idolatry, magic, superstitious rites, and prayer to saints or other creatures. That I rightly acknowledge the only true God, trust in him alone, look to him for every good thing humbly and patiently, love him, fear him, and honor him with all my heart. In short, that I give up anything rather than go against his will in any way.
What is idolatry?
Something in which one trusts and places
who has revealed himself in his word. What is God's will for us in the second commandment?
that we in no way make any image of God or worship him in other ways that he has commanded in his word.
May we then not make any image at all?
God cannot and may not be visibly portrayed in any way. Although creatures may be portrayed, yet God forbids making or having such images
Okay. All right. The word of the Lord. And our confessions. The confessions of our faith. The parts of our tradition. People of God, these days many folks are quick to criticize Christians to be too judgmental and all about rules. Okay? If you're a Christian, it means you can't do this, you can't do that. You're just stick in the mud folks who don't know how to live free and have fun. Who would want that? And why? I don't know. But in any case, keep your rules to yourself and certainly don't try and give us any lectures on it. And they might say, well, hey, what are the 10 Commandments anyway? Have you read them lately? Don't covet my neighbor's donkey? My neighbor doesn't have a donkey. Why would you still hold tight to these ancient rules that I'm not even sure apply anymore? Besides, I'm pretty sure we've learned a few things in the last few thousand years since those 10 Commandments were written, right? Come on, like, what makes you think they still matter for today? Science is our authority, not religious regulations. So please stop insisting that they be posted in our courthouses and taught to our children. Okay? Now, I think there are some legitimate criticisms there about how Christians conduct themselves. Yes, sometimes we have been pushy and rules-oriented in a bad way. And it's good for us to be honest about that. After all, if we're only known for the rules that we make, are we getting it right? Aren't we supposed to be known for our love? Isn't that the Jesus way? Well, as it turns out, it's kind of a false dichotomy. It's not either the law or love. For followers of the Jesus way, the law is love. We see that most clearly listening to Jesus. Jesus was once asked to identify which commandment, which rule is the most important. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. It's interesting to note that when we study the commandments, that the first 4 roughly point in the direction of loving God, and the second to loving our neighbor. Okay? The Catechism makes a point of highlighting that breakdown when it talks about the 2 tables of the law. And when Moses came down the mountainside, they talk about him having stone tablets, and sometimes when we draw them, we have 2 of them, right? That's often, the traditional way of saying there's 2 tablets. But one tablet essentially says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? Love God. And the second says, love your neighbor. And here's how, okay? But love is at the root of the whole law. It's meant to show us how to build and keep life-giving relationships with God and with each other. And certainly the law does challenge us when we're doing something wrong, just like it does today, right? As you're driving here, there's speed limits on the side of the road to tell you, well, how fast to drive and to slow down. Even if you're late for church, it's, you're still not safe to drive that speed. But the more important side of the law is that it shows us how to respond in love to the God who has shown his love to us. Over Good Friday and Easter, we listened and we heard and we remembered the story of how Jesus laid his life down for us in love. Dying to set us free and to break the power of sin. And when we study and obey God's law now, it is a way for us to say thank you, to respond to his love with the love of our own. That's actually how the 10 Commandments originally worked as well. They were given to the people of Israel after God rescued them from slavery in Egypt. And God had performed many miracles to do that, including the 10 plagues and breaking open the Red Sea so that they could cross safely and escape Pharaoh's army. These things God did. And he did because he loved them. He really loved them. And the most significant thing that God wanted for his people was for them to love him in return. And it echoed with strong commands to love and care for each other. That was the heart of it. That was the heart of the whole law, the whole 10 commandments, right? I have done all of this for you. I have freed you. Now come, be my people. I will be your God. I will care for you. I will take care of you. I'm going to show you who I am, and I'm going to show you how much I love you. Okay. We see that invitation in the first words of the 10 commandments. It's first a reminder of who he is and what he has done. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. This is the love I have shown you. I heard your suffering. I remembered the promises I made to your ancestors, and I came to rescue you. I fought for you. I defeated the power of Pharaoh and all the gods of Egypt. I broke your chains. I have shown you my love. Now here's how I want you to respond. Show your love to me and to each other. But here's where it starts, right? He says, you shall have no other gods before me. God's saying, I am not willing to share you with anyone, especially with false gods, like the ones I just threw down in Egypt. I fought for you. I have invested deeply in you. I want you and only you. I am your God. You are my people. Love me. Trust me. Let me care for you. I will never let you go. Right? Now, the Catechism explains a few things in a way that maybe we question God's loyalty and the strength of that relationship. I mean, is that right? Here it is in question 94. It says, what does the Lord require in the first commandment? That I, not wanting to endanger my very salvation, avoid and shun all idolatry, magic, superstitious rites, and prayer to saints or other creatures. Now there's a question there, right, that I want to wrestle with a bit. Can I endanger my salvation? How do I do that? How do I wreck this relationship? I mean, after all, isn't God's love for me so strong, right? How do I break that? How do I mess this up? We've always learned that God's relationship with us is rock solid. It's built on the strongest foundation there is, God's incredible love for us. And I know that I will often say that God's grip is on me is so much stronger than my grip on him, and it's his love that this all depends on. And that's a good thing. It means that I can rest secure in his love. I can live in security and trust, knowing that no matter how badly I screw up in this relationship, I can always come home and find love and forgiveness. So is it right then to say that by doing some things, I can endanger the whole relationship? Well, let's start by recalling a few things from the way Israel responded to God. I mean, God has done all of this work of rescuing them from Egypt, and what did they want to do? When things got tough, they ran out of food or water, they complained loudly that they would be better off in Egypt. Now imagine if they had done that, if they had walked away from God and went back to be slaves in Egypt. Would that have broken the relationship? Was it possible for them to break covenant with God and walk away? Yes, it was. And God was ready to let them do it sometimes. He was kind of done with them, right? But God warned them in the strongest terms that if they turned and followed other gods or they dabbled in pagan practices, that was the same thing. It's breaking covenant. They're turning their back on him. It's going back to be in chains again. Why do you want this? You served all those gods in Egypt. They made you build stuff. They took away your freedom. They beat you. They whipped you. And you want to go back there? I mean, is it different for us, right? With the new covenant with Jesus? I mean, the new covenant at the cross does work a little differently. Can we endanger our salvation by walking away? And Paul certainly warns against that. He says, let's not return to slavery, okay? He uses those language, and I mean, we sometimes will soften it and we'll say it's like, well, servanthood, right? We like servanthood a little better, but the Greek word is doulos. It's slave. You be a slave to sin. And it'll also say then, to be a slave to God instead, because you're free with God, right? He gives you freedom. But verse 16 says it well, don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. In Paul's language, which certainly resonates with God's original purpose, the key question is freedom, right? Will we be slaves to sin or slaves to God's design, which is righteousness? One leads to sin, the other to life. Slavery to God's design is actually freedom, because now we're learning from our Maker. This is who you are. This is how I made you to live. Here's how you can flourish. And if you do these things, you won't. When I was a kid in Grand Prairie, my family had tropical fish. And one of my favorites was this red-tailed shark. It looked kind of like this. So I was allergic to cats and dogs and all kinds of, and dust and mold and everything under the sun. So this was one of the few pets we could actually have. And I think some of my allergies got a little bit better. But so I would often go and I'd watch the fish, and this was my favorite one to watch. But then I went one day and he was missing from the tank, and I didn't know where he went. I found him on the floor outside the tank because he had jumped. He looked at us through the glass and said, "Wow, it looks amazing out there," and said, "I want that too." And didn't make it. I wasn't there fast enough. If I'd caught him when he first went out, maybe I could have thrown him back in. He would have been fine, but not a few hours later. And so he died. He's just not designed for life outside the tank. No matter how appealing it looked, he needs water. He's designed that way. He's made that way. And when we look at ourselves too and we ask God, it's like, well, what has God made us to be? How has he made us to live? How are we supposed to know that? You know what? If God is our maker, if anyone can teach us what we are meant for and how we're supposed to live, it's him. And if he says the world outside his will may look very appealing, but you're not meant for that, it will kill you, it's better if we listen. And God does show a lot of grace. He gives people second and third and fourth chances all the time. We jump, we're flopping around, God picks us up, and he puts us back. But sometimes he doesn't. Not always. If we're stubborn, and if we're clear that this is what we want for ourselves, God sometimes let us make that choice, even if it means that we suffer and die. I think that's where God, he honors some of the freedom that he's given us. It's like, you know what? You want out? I love you. It breaks my heart. But if you really need to go, you can go. Right? He lets us do it. And that's a hard thing. So it's like it's a parent, watching their kids make just choices that are hard, right? God allows it. But let's talk more specifically about what that looks like for us today, right? Like about who do we follow when we come to God and we follow his will, right? And with that first command, only me. Only me. So here's the first question, right? Who or what do we worship today? Right? I mean, God's saying, only me, no other gods, right? Well, people in our culture don't worship things like the ancients used to. We don't worship trees or the rocks, the sun, the ocean, gods of stone or territorial gods. I mean, if one of us set up a shrine in the middle of a field or venerating a tree in the park as our great thunder oak with mystical powers, we'd have all kinds of people questioning our sanity. But we have plenty of our own idols that we favor. What are they? And I think the right question shows us what those things are. What do we put first? What's first in our life? Right? People look to all kinds of things with hope and trust. These can be idols for us. Politics, reason, money, pleasure, escape, tradition, guarding things as they're supposed to be, nature, pleasure, popularity, image, how I look, how people think of me. Family can be an idol, right? It's our first thing, it's the only thing that matters, and I'm going to do everything I can to protect my family. Success, drugs, wealth, power, respect, food, fitness, beauty, health, pornography, excitement, pride, lust, revenge, protecting my lifestyle, right? All of these things. A Dutch theologian named J. Dauma put it very well. He said, the heart can become addicted to anything in our homes, from the attic to the cellar. We can always make something first. This is my first priority. This is the thing that matters to me, and I fixate on it more than anything else. Everything else falls in behind. The first commandment is where God says, put me first. As Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God, and God will provide everything you need. Not everything you want, right? Is Jesus in the context of that passage, he's talking about our endless worry for all the things. What will I eat? What will I drink? What will I wear? Right? So he's not talking about things we want for ourselves, like popularity or wealth or power, just the things that God knows we need. Somehow God knows a better way than just giving us everything we want. Can we trust him on that? But that's the key message of the first commandment. Okay? And all the rest fall in behind it. Right? Trust God. Choose freedom. Choose the way he wants for us. Right? Paul says, don't be slaves anymore to your desires. Right? Or God saying, don't be slaves anymore to your desires. I've rescued you. Don't go back there. Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body so that you obey its evil desires. Do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and offer every part of yourself to him as an instrument of righteousness. For sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not under law, but under grace. And over the years, I've come to realize that this commandment and obeying it is a lot about our identity. Who am I? Who are we? And when I ask myself that question, well, who am I? There's a whole list of things that can come up. Am I a father? What kind of dad am I? Right? Am I a good guy? Am I good looking? Am I a hard worker? Am I a good lover? Am I a good neighbor? Am I well spoken? Am I intelligent? And these days we might add a whole list of identifiers on top of that, right? Am I part of the sexual minority? Am I a liberal? Am I a conservative? Am I black? Am I white? Am I a capitalist or am I a socialist? Am I a bit of both? Am I Dutch? Am I Italian? Am I African? All of these things that we these identifiers we use for ourselves, right? Who am I? When we listen to the first commandment, I think the first answer that comes out of our mouth when someone asks us who that is, or in our own mind even, when we think about ourselves, who am I? The first answer should be this: I am His. I am a servant of my King. My identity, my purpose is rooted in that primary relationship. He is my God. I am His kid. And I should build my life on that reality, not on anything else. Because all of those other things are transitory. Right? Politics, health, beauty, right? It's like, well, I can go to the gym my whole life and, and fixate on that. It's not necessarily going to mean that I'm healthy. And that my energy will fade. Right? It's transitory. It's not going to last forever. And accepting my core identity as belonging to God means that I work to honor who God is and what God wants of me. That means I respect how He wants me to come to Him. The second commandment touches on that. It's talking about worship. Right? When God says, I'm not like the other gods, I don't want you to make golden statues of me to worship. God prefers to remain invisible and present always and everywhere. Right? We're respecting that. Question and answer 97 spells it out well. It says, God cannot and may not be visibly portrayed in any way. Although creatures may be portrayed, yet God forbids making or having such images if one's intention is to worship them or to serve God through them. Not having idols tells us something significant about God. Right? By commanding this, God is telling us that He is everywhere. He doesn't live in a temple or a shrine. There aren't places, this place isn't necessarily more holy than that place. God is with us wherever we go. At work, at home, at school, in bed, stuck in traffic, flying in the air at 10,000 feet, in space, other planets. So it's like, you don't need idols in your home or in your workplace. You don't need me hanging on the end of a keychain. That's not me. That's not how I want you to worship me. It's a reminder for us. I think that when we obey this and we say that by doing that, we say this is a relationship where we are showing respect for God and that this is how He wants the relationship to work. Right? He doesn't want us to make idols, so we don't do it. He doesn't want us to draw pictures of Him and try and fit Him into our little graphics of who God is. He doesn't want us to do that. We respect Him by not doing it. It's a way we try and show love to God. It's like to understand that this is God of the universe. It's not a figment of my imagination. He really wants some things. And this is one of the ways we show love, is in how we come and worship Him. And where. Right? Well, people of God, this morning we've started a deep dive into God's law laid out in the Ten Commandments. And as we've seen, God's law is quite simply this: love. The law is love. Love God and love our neighbor. We've covered a whole lot of ground this morning. And I'm sorry if we packed too much in. It gets that way sometimes. But here's the overview. We are on a journey of change. We are dying and rising with Christ. We are leaving behind slavery to sin. All the chasing around, trying to fulfill our wants and desires with whatever we can grab a hold of. We're trying to break from that way of thinking and being. And we are responding to God's love. We're coming sincerely, openly, honestly into a relationship with the God who loves us. Claiming that identity, that I am His, I belong to Him. That's the first thing. That's my lead part of my identity. For the people of Israel, obeying God's law was a way that they thanked and honored God for rescuing them from slavery in Egypt, For us, it is our way of responding to the incredible love that God has shown on the cross, where Jesus died to free us from our slavery to sin. And we are learning to put God first. And in my experience, when we put God first, everything else, all kinds of good things that we can fixate on and become distractions for us, all of those things fall into place as they should. They find a better, the healthier home, the right place. Okay? It's still good for me to care about my health. It's still good for me to be involved in politics. It's still good for me to do all of these things. But my first identity is I am His. And then when I'm going to take care of myself, I'm doing it because this is, my body is my temple, and I want to serve God well with what I have and with the life He's given me. I got to nurture it. I'm going to serve God in politics. I'm going to try and work for justice in our communities, and compassion and mercy and grace and wisdom and patience, all of those things, right? But our identity helps all of those things move in a healthier direction. They find the right place in our life. Okay? We put God first. And we are learning to respect and honor God's wishes in this relationship. And one of those is that we don't carve idols of Him or paint pictures of Him. We respect that. He's different than the other gods. He's not a God that we stick on our keychain, right? We don't have to buy the little magic charms to carry around with us that are going to guard us and give us luck. Like this is the God of the universe. He doesn't want to be something hanging around your neck, right? But we are people who are learning to trust God and stay free. That God is our maker. He knows how He made us and what He made us for. If we trust His design for us, we will live lives of fullness and health and joy. This is the relationship to which you and I are invited, a relationship built on the strongest kind of love, and where the law, all the rules and instructions are meant to show us how to love each other better, to live with freedom and fullness of life. So let's grab a hold of Him. Let's make Him first, and let's never let Him go. All God's people said, Amen.